So starting a little bit with me, I'm older, I'm greyer. I've been in product and technology now for about 28 years. I started right back in the 90s where I built a small consulting practice that got bought by Nokia. I was the first person to implement a Java virtual machine on a mobile phone, and I built one of the first apps on what was a little camera-based breadboard that went on to become the first camera-based phone in the world with Nokia. Nokia bought that company, and I ran a small R&D group out of Sydney, so I'm Australian. I know there's someone Australian in the audience. Out of Sydney and Finland for about 3 years. At the end of that earn-out, I left and came back to Europe. At that point, I joined Yahoo after the dot-com crash, and I spent 5 years with them running mobile engineering globally and trying to regenerate their business from a mobile perspective. That went relatively well. From there, I left, took a little bit of time off, and then did a little startup called Open Video Ads, which became the world's biggest open source video ad piece of technology in the world in the very, very early days of video advertising. So when you went onto YouTube and you see a pre-roll ad, I was pre that. So if you went to the Guardian website, went to playboy.com, I won't ask for hands, or you went to ESPN and you saw a pre-roll ad, that was my tech that was serving it. We're doing about 5 billion ads a month. When I sold that tech to JWPlayer in the US, and it's now part of their overall ad serving platform. So I've been an entrepreneur, I've gone through startup phases, I've done the open source thing, literally myself in my bedroom, doing something and serving thousands of customers and billions of ads a month. I've also done the people thing and built a consulting practice and sold that, and I've done a lot of R&D work. But the thing I'm actually most proud about is my more recent activity. I work for a company here in London called Perkbox. We're literally just 2 blocks down the road in the old Bloomberg building. And we're what people literally these days call a scale-up. We're not a startup anymore. So let me tell you a little bit about Perkbox, and I'll talk to you a little bit about the journey, and I'll put a bit of engineering, a bit of product, and a bit of entrepreneurship stuff in that. We've been around for going on 7 years now. Actually, it's between 6 and 7 years, and we've been on a journey. So I'd say the first 3 years of the journey was pivot, 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 pivot. And probably 4 or 5 pivots in there, to be honest with you. And I think probably 3 years into that journey, the 4th or 5th pivot was focused on something that actually isn't where the company is today. Where we are today is completely left field from where we expected to be, and came out of a very little skunkworksy type project in the company that went on to become so successful that the company got rebranded in line with the new little skunkworks project. And today we are what's known as an employee experience company. We recognise that the workforce is changing, and the people's experience of the workforce is changing, and therefore the demands of the workforce, of what they expect when they go to work, is changing. And that's primarily driven from the fact that pretty much today about 50% of the workforce in most modern economies is millennial. And millennial people, you guys will know, are the first truly digital generation. You expect feedback on demand, and you expect to go to work to be mentored, not to be bossed. So the requirements of the workplace are changing as a result of this changed expectation, and we service that in some way, shape or form. The way we service that is with a growing set of digital products. We're a SaaS-based business. We started with 1 product. We now have 4 products. We're in 3 markets. In terms of the overall size of the company, we have about 8,000 companies on the platform. These range from little companies, and literally 2, 3, 4, 5 employees in the company, through to the bigger ones that you sort of see listed on the board. There's a lot more than that, but we service some very, very large companies as well. We have about 289, there might be 291 today, who knows, people join every day. But we have tripled in size in the last 18 months, I'd say, in terms of people. We've tripled in markets as well, so we're in the UK primarily for most of our journey, but in the last year we've gone into France, and we're also in Australia. So we're now what we think is global, at least the start of the global journey. And we've faced some real challenges on that path. And what I want to do very quickly today is to, A, talk about the challenges that we've faced, but do those in the context of some lessons that we've learned. Before I do that though, I just want to give you a feel for the tech, so for the engineering side of the equation. So we aren't a mobile-first company. We should be a mobile-first company. That's part of the journey that we're literally on. But we do largely regard ourselves as a one kind of our platform-based SaaS company where we've got multiple products that fit within that overall framework. So if you download our app on the App Store today, you can get access to the 4 products. Next year it'll probably be 5 products. The year after that, 6 products. But we're going through a bit of a change at the moment, trying to integrate all of that into one unified platform. It's one of the lessons that we've learned. But it is good for us because our UX and design part of the product process is particularly good, and actually against the competition we stand out. That helps us win significantly in the market, and it's something we pride ourselves on and we can continue to drive. Our tech stack's very modern, so we're React and React Native on the front end. We're Go in terms of microservice-based architecture. Of course, we're going to have a ton of things, probably 100 bits of technology in some way, shape or form. Some of the main little bits and pieces you'll sort of see on the left side of that diagram. So of course we run up on the cloud on Amazon. We run everything on Kubernetes. We've got very distributed database set up, and we run a data warehouse. And of course we use things like GitLab for integration as we go forward. But this is not where we started. When we started, we were a PHP monolithic based bit of tech. And actually 6.5 years later down the track, we still have some customers running on the old PHP platform, sitting in a dedicated colo somewhere on some machines that we dare not touch, because if we touch them, they're going to break. And if they break, the thing can't be recovered. So we had to grow, as we pivoted and pivoted and pivoted, we pivoted on that platform in many ways, shapes and forms. And to be honest with you, we made a mess. And when we actually started to be very successful, we hit some walls, some really, really big walls. And as a result of that, we literally locked the engineering team away for a year. They literally separated themselves from the business, put themselves on a completely different floor, closed the door, and rebuilt the platform as a microservice-based architecture. We did that very successfully. It has actually allowed us to grow significantly, but once again, we're hitting some walls. And some of those walls are some lessons that we've learned along the way that I'll share. We are going through the 3rd evolution of our platform now as a result of that, but we're very firmly in the microservice-based space, and that is definitely the tech stack that we stay with. We find that that works particularly well for us. All right, a little bit about the team so you understand how we're structured. So we're the old, well, what's known as the Spotify tribe and squad model. So I have a team of about 102 in product and engineering, including a little bit of the commercial organisation. We're largely split across 7 different tribes and 16 squads of people that work on parts of the product set over time. And of course, we didn't start that way. We started with one little tribe, one little squad of people, all building the thing together. And then as we scaled and grew, we've evolved this model. It's probably taken 3 years of quite intense evolution to get this model right. We're still not there. It's rickety and it has its problems, but it's pretty stable now. The one thing I would say for those on the engineering side, which is why I've got dots on this, and I hope my team's not going to be watching the video, is that the DevOps part of the equation we really haven't cracked well. We have a very siloed kind of DevOps environment, and we've hit some issues as a result of that, and there's some lessons that come from that I'll talk through. All right, let's just start with the lessons, and I'll rocket through these so that you can ask some questions as we go. Honestly, I always used to think that the whole startup thing was the toughest phase, and having been through it multiple times and failed along the way, by the way, with several that I didn't mention that just didn't go anywhere. I really used to think that was the toughest thing. But now, having gone through scaling, actually, it's just genuinely way tougher. The reason that it's way tougher is because growth is addictive. When you start to succeed, all you want to do is continue succeeding, and you want that growth rate to be higher and higher and higher. And it gets to the point, and I do agree with the point about investors. When you've got investors in the group, they love the growth. They love the growth. And there's a natural expectation that you're going to maintain and exceed that growth level year on year on year on year. But of course you get bigger. You got more people, you got more tech, you got more debt that you're building up in terms of tech debt. You got people issues that you're starting to deal with. And before you know it, you literally wake up in the morning and you go, oh my God, this is the Titanic. And I've got to move this Titanic here. in order to be able to continue to scale. And of course, the consequence of that is just a tough exercise. And it's also a very costly exercise. And before you know it, your growth rates are slowing. And when your growth rates are slowing, everybody's going, why are you slowing down? You should be speeding up. So if you don't actually do things right, at least a couple principal things when you're in startup mode, you really, really can pay for it when you start scaling. And that pain is very difficult because it affects your confidence as an organization. And that's probably one of the greatest things that you need is a self-belief as you go forward, particularly as you get bigger and the stakes get higher. You might be burning 50 grand worth of cash every month. When you're scaling, you can be burning millions a month easily. And the stakes of that are significant, and the fundraising and everything that goes with that becomes much more significant. So the cost is very high. The one thing that we definitely really didn't understand when we were early stage is that we're in the UK, we attack the UK market. I think we've done an extremely good job in the UK market. We dominate the market here in terms of our product set, but we just didn't think globally. So everything we did was for the UK. We built the platform and we put it in Ireland and we tied it to some regional setup in Ireland. And then last year we made this really sort of brave decision, let's go to Australia. It's a great market. Our competitors are very successful there. We think we can dominate in that market. And of course, running our tech out of Ireland in Australia doesn't cut it. The latencies are long, the overall deployment cycle is out of sync because of the timing, time zone differences and everything else. So you have to think about spinning up a second region. So of course we go, okay, we'll spin a second region up. Where do people put this stuff? We did our research and we found out the West Coast was the best place to put it. So we said, okay, let's spin up a second region. That was unbelievably difficult. We did not have our infrastructure at a point where it was just scripted and ready to deploy in another region. It was incredibly painful to pick it up and to put it into the US. And to be honest with you, I was a little amazed. It's not difficult tech. It's pretty modern, very modern tech. But we just made some bad design decisions when we went along. And most importantly, we didn't involve the kind of a DevOps mindset in the development process for a second generation of our platform from day one. As a result, we were always trying to kind of catch up from a deployment point of view. So when we made the decision to go to Australia, it took us 4 months to get the US region up before they could even start to think about selling in Australia. Now that's a painful exercise because of course we want to go to the next market and the next market, and the next market, and the next market. So we're going to want to scale out to other areas. So now as we're going forward, we're basically going, right, let's just make sure that at the third version of the platform, we set it up day one, running in multiple regions with all of its infrastructure set up to be deployed in multiple regions from day one. Tool up as you go. This was the second most painful thing for us in this last year. So, of course, very entrepreneurial company, largely driven by very successful commercial drive and a big sales and marketing machine that brings the customers in. Brilliant. Very, very small tech team building the platform. The next thing that happened is that as we started to bring more customers on board, of course you have to support them. You have to get through account management, you have to get through customer happiness and customer success in order to be able to make sure you build a long-term relationship and you retain them. So we thought in the early days, great, we'll just hire people. They can be the account managers, they can get on the phone and they can answer and address the problems as we go. But of course the consequence of that at scale is that it's extremely costly. So where we sit as an organisation at the moment, we probably support twice the number of people that we need to on the support side of the operation than we do on the general technical side of the operation. And actually there's this factor, particularly in the SaaS world, that gets called the growth efficiency index. And most people generally refer that to, for every dollar you spend, what do you get in terms of growth, in terms of your market? But other people look at that in terms of for every dollar you spend, actually, how efficient are you in the use of that dollar? Now, if you look at the growth efficiency for us as a company, we're not in a bad place, but we're not in the best place. So if we want to spin more markets up, we want to get more customers on board, we have to make sure that we automate as much as possible, because by automating as much as possible, the cost and the overhead of having people goes down, and therefore growth efficiency goes up. And you are, in essence, much easier and much more effective to scale. So as entrepreneurs, it's a really kind of important lesson. On the technical side, the other thing that we really learned through the process, and particularly with the microservice-based architecture, is that we didn't really early on value the role of an architect in the organisation. We had a flat structure. We let all of our developers build their services and go for it and get it done. They did that very successfully. We got a product shipped and out the door, and as I said, we went from 1 to 4 products very, very quickly last year. But the consequence of not having strong architecture in the team is that we had a lot of duplication. And a lot of people working in siloed ways within the organisation, and of course that then impacts the operation of the platform going forward, the maintenance, the cost and everything that goes with that. So if I was going to go back and do anything again, I'd say it's great to have young people in the team. It's great to let them off and running, but they definitely need some oversight, and you kind of need to make sure that's in there from day one. And of course, as I talked through, we really didn't do much on the DevOps side. So we manually, just as we did with customer support and everything else, we largely covered that with manual function. So the tooling, the automation, the oversight, the architecture, these are all critical things that you just generally have to do from an engineering point of view very early on. Otherwise, when you really do start to be successful, you pay the price. And at that stage, it just becomes scary. So the thing that I also learned along the way is that it is just genuinely all about the data. So everyone says that, okay, you put the metrics into the product, you get to understand how people are using it, and you kind of do that whole thing. But actually, when you're scaling, it's not necessarily the UX-oriented metrics that are the key thing. It tends to be all the other data. So it's not only what the customers are doing on the platform, it's how they're doing it, it's when they're doing it, but more importantly, it's how that fits with the operational and the organisational function. So for example, as a SaaS-based business, of course, we've got a sales and marketing machine that brings customers in. We look at the life cycle of customers and we try to understand what their usage is and their propensity to churn. Because as a SaaS-based business, we want to keep churn down, we want to keep the customers in, and we want to grow our book. So we get on a daily basis just demand within the organisation to do analysis just on our customer life cycles, right? And it's not just about what they do in the product, but it's literally everything about the organisation. The more we know, the more intelligent we can be, and the more effective we can be in addressing churn and keeping the customer base in our book growing. So we didn't start a data warehouse at day one. We started a data warehouse literally 5 years into a 6-year running business. And then we had to retrospectively start to pull the data out from hundreds of data sources around the organisation, all doing the data in different ways. And I would almost say, and our chief data scientist today would say, one of the biggest costs and inhibitors to us scaling effectively is the fact that we've had to spend an entire year trying to clean our data up. And even today, we're working aggressively on it. So get the architecture right, think about global on day one, be very aware that if you don't tool up, you're going to have to tool up at some point, and just get your infrastructure from a data warehousing point of view going. You don't have to do much, but just get the pipelines running so your data is being stored consistently and coherently, because then you can start to leverage it. Of course, everyone talks about this too, which is trust and autonomy is really core. You can't scale a business by having a monolithic group of people following one leader and not understanding the purpose that they're going for, but at the same time not splitting that group up so that they can basically autonomously run in line with one vision. So as I say, we've got a tribal model. We have a number of different tribes. They are, for all intents and purposes, supposed to be autonomous. They can do what they want, when they want, how they want to do it. They have an identity in their own right, but they work towards a common goal. Of course, we have some dependencies and that slows things down. And of course, that also impacts our pipelines and the way we do our builds, because all of that's got to be unified to push one product set out to the market. And we try to do daily releases, and daily releases across all these tribes is challenging. But you've got to trust them to do the job, and you've got to give them the autonomy to do that. If you don't do that, then they tend to be just sitting there until they get pushed. And we've spent a lot of time really working on that within the organisation, and we've got a way to go. But when we've got that down very successfully, it has worked brilliantly. But of course, you do need leadership, and from an engineering and a product point of view, you need strong leadership, because maintaining your culture as you go. So last year we went from start of the year 100, sub 100, just under that, to by the end of the year, 250, I suppose. This year we've been up and down. We haven't grown enormously in terms of people because it's more about efficiency than it is growth. But we added a lot of people last year, and we did that. So my team, product and engineering, I went from 30 to 102 in 3 months. So I hired a lot of people, and in a very short period of time. And of course that brings diversity, it brings different opinion, and it brings people who weren't there at the start. You know, they're not the core group that go through the hard time. And you've got to gel all these people together. And it's really difficult to maintain your culture, and you've really got to work on it. I think because we're an employee experience company, kind of got a cool brand and cool vibe, and it kind of works. We've hired a lot of like-minded people, and that's really helped us maintain some culture. But we find this year that we have to work really hard on it. The thing we really lack is really strong technical leadership and strong product leadership. So this year we focused a lot more on bringing that layer into the organisation, because without that, actually you just fall over a lot. You know, you trip over each other, you do make mistakes. People are always well-intentioned, but they don't always think, you know, long-term and across the organisation and everything else. And all of that costs you as you scale, because all of these things impact you in some way, shape, or form. So getting leadership right, getting the platform right, getting the people right, maintaining the culture, I mean, these are all challenges. And they're fun challenges because you're in a really great growth company. But they're just difficult challenges, and they're very different to the normal startup type challenges. And of course, underpinning all of that is that you've just got to be very aware that as you're going forward, you've got to raise more money. You want to go to more markets, you want to do that aggressively, you want to increase your marketing budgets, you want to capture more of the market, and you're going up the tiers. You know, you're not getting the seed cash anymore, you're not even getting the Series A, the Series B cash, you're getting the Series C cash. And the Series C cash, literally, the pitch is a one-slide pitch, which probably for a SaaS business has 4 metrics on it. It's everything from how efficient is your sales process through to how efficient are you in terms of the growth mechanics within the organisation, i.e. if I give you this money, are you going to be able to go the maximum way with the money I give you? And of course, we're on the other side of the table going, we want to know that if you give us that money, we're going to have the highest valuation we can possibly have, because we're as efficient as we can possibly be. If you're weak on any of those fronts, you know, you're going to have to negotiate hard. So paying attention to those key metrics is really critical, which means throwing people at it isn't always the solution, and that you do have to take time and invest in the product and in the technology. And sometimes that means just taking a little bit longer than you would have done when you started up, because actually doing it right at this point in your life is far more important than actually doing it in rushed and then paying the cost down the track. And finally, the last bit that I'll just sort of leave you on, being an employee experience company, it really genuinely is all about the employee experience. Because the other shock to the system is that, of course, you're a small company, you get your people in, they're core people, they're loyal, they stay with you through thick and thin because you're on the journey together. And then all of a sudden, you're hundreds of people in this company who no longer have been on that journey. So therefore, when times become tough, in a very competitive market, they'll abandon ship. And when you're 100 people or even 50 people, 1 or 2 abandoning ship, you can kind of live with. But if you're 300 people and they start abandoning ship, these are big groups of people that leave the company. And you're then scrambling to kind of keep everything going. So as you grow, all of this is linked. You focus on the tech, you get the architecture right, you get the deployment processes right, you get the product right, you get the design principles right, you got to maintain the culture, and at the same time you have to deliver a compelling experience to employees, because when they come, they want to know they're working at the best company. Because trust me, if at any stage you think it's not the best company, and we have Monzo next door, all right, who are growing massively. In fact, we moved into these 2 buildings at exactly the same time, and actually we've got 2 other scale-ups above us, who we all know are attractive, and everybody knows they're attractive. All right, so I love it, I enjoy it, it's a fantastic point to be in as a company, but it brings very different challenges than the point at which you're a startup. And for those who are in the startup point now, wish you all the success. Definitely go aggressively for it, but just pay a little bit of attention as you go to not create problems for you further down the track. That's it.
lot from me.